Welcome everybody to the Panda Security webinar, Simplify Patch Management. My name is James Banning. I'm a pre-sales engineer here at Panda Security US, and I will be taking you through the presentation today. Just a note about interaction today, as we always like to pass on before we start. You will not be able to sort of verbally communicate with me today, but there is a little chat box there in your client. So what we always do is we encourage you to enter in any questions, any comments, or anything like that you may have throughout the presentation. At the end, we are going to reserve a minute or two to go over any questions that may have come up. We'll also be leaving some contact details as well, and if something comes to mind afterwards, you don't get a chance to ask your question, feel free to get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to provide you with any answers. So, simplifying patch management. Quick look at our agenda. Really kind of simple today, but we're actually going to do a little bit of a change. We're going to throw in a bit of a demo for you. So the first thing we want to go over is why patch management. I mean, it's kind of an obvious thing for most of us, but we want to talk about why it's important, why we're talking about it today. And then next, in particular, we want to take a look at why Panda patch management. Why do we think this is such a valuable thing to bring to you today? And as we see here, we're going to go into a little bit of a demo on the product, and we will wrap it up very simply with some Q&A at the end. So why patch management? So I think a good starting place to answer this question is to take a look at some good facts. When it comes to software, the development cycles, as we see here, are becoming increasingly short, but also flexible. An increasing number of products and versions coming out from each vendor. And I think this is natural. I mean, we saw a little bit of this from the traditional AV space. And I think what tends to spur this on is commoditization. So as a product becomes mainstream and you have a lot of different vendors that are producing it, you get into a feature fight at some point. So you're trying to introduce new little features here and there as frequently as possible to kind of get an edge up on any of your competition. But what does this mean as far as the security aspect? Well, when you start to shorten those development life cycles, maybe you don't have the security checks in place, or you're not doing the QA on them, or something along those lines, you're cutting corners essentially. So what we start to see are flaws in the code itself. So for instance, in 2017, there was 20,000 flaws and vulnerabilities that were recorded. And that is 38% more than in the previous 5 years. I don't know that it's a correlation, but I find it interesting that if you look at exploits and you look at malware explosion, you see these big jumps as well happening kind of along the same pace. Now, when we start talking about vulnerable software, this particular platform is ubiquitous, so I think a lot of us tend to gravitate towards this part of the discussion, and it's looking at Microsoft. We all like to say Microsoft is like Swiss cheese, there's so many holes in it, so on and so forth. You have a lot of people that won't even use it because of the vulnerabilities, but vulnerable software isn't just a problem that belongs to Microsoft alone. In fact, third-party applications have become a lot more common targets, if you will, for attackers. And as we see here, this is from the National Vulnerability Database. 86% of the security flaws that were found were in third-party applications, things like Adobe and Java and Chrome and so on. So, kind of what leads to some of this? Well, to sort of summarize it, software without updates compromises your overall security. If we look at some statistics here, 70% of internet attacks target vulnerabilities in installed software, and why not? 80% of successful attacks exploit vulnerabilities with existing patches that just haven't been applied. That one's a little bit staggering for me. It tells me that there's so much more that we could be doing to cut down our exposure. And I think obviously all of us would want to do more to reduce sort of our attack surface, the chances of infections. So there has to be something that's kind of playing into that mix that prevents us from doing so. And I think there's probably several reasons why our patch management tends to fall behind the curve. One is product complexity. If you have a particular product in play, third-party product, with onerous requirements for updating and communication and things like that, and it doesn't kind of fit in with sort of the flow of your regular patch management activities in the environment, well, it makes things a little bit difficult. And we've talked about it before. IT staffs have shrunk, the budgets have shrunk, so it's not always something that's going to get attention right away. I mean, what do they say? The squeaking wheel, the squeaking door gets the grease, whatever it may be. So it's not an immediate concern sometimes, or just something that can't be had time attributed to it immediately. So that kind of response, it leads to unpatched computers, and naturally those are going to be exposed to threats. They're going to be vulnerable to threats. Another big one, and this is something that just keeps progressing, is increased user mobility. But I would even go so far as to say that really the changing of the network itself. We used to be in a time where the network itself was very sort of holistic. It was all in a nice pin. It was pretty easy to control. Everybody had a desktop. Nobody was bringing in devices. But that's changed. You have remote offices. You have remote users. You have field users. You have BYOD users. You have contractors, and so on and so forth. You don't necessarily have that perimeter anymore. Not only is that difficult to secure, but when we start talking about maintaining systems, like with patch management, it can introduce its own challenges in there. If you don't have an adequate system that allows you to deal with some of these challenges, you may be doing it the old way. Having to get a system, you have a roaming user or a field user comes in and say, hey, I need your laptop, and now I'm going to sit here for an hour and go through and manually apply updates. Well, in the meantime, if that's the process that you're using, those machines are running around out in the field, vulnerable to attack. So that mobility, if you really don't have sort of a plan in place and an effective solution, it makes it difficult to stay on top of those things. Two very good examples of what we talked about, especially when we go back to that statistics of 80% of attacks happening because of vulnerabilities with existing patches. WannaCry and Petya, two of them. They exploited vulnerabilities that had been known for months. WannaCry paralyzed hospitals. Emergency rooms had to turn people away. Banks and businesses around the world as well. Hospitals in the UK had to reject patients. We had them here in the US as well. And medical devices in the US were also impacted. I remember when WannaCry came out, it was one of those things where your face kind of just goes white, had a severe impact. Petya was another one. Also affected hospitals. They had to cancel operations. In other key sectors, airlines had to cancel flights, banks. And what I found interesting with this was that it even affected the monitoring systems for the Chernobyl nuclear energy plant. Chernobyl already had the meltdown, and then they had the issues with trying to maintain the shell, the protective shell, and then they turn around and they get Petya, which affects the monitoring systems. So think of the impact with that. We're talking about systems that have patches available for those vulnerabilities. They weren't applied, and in this case, probably worst case, it affected monitoring systems for a nuclear energy plant. So with all that in mind, we admit that we have some challenges that we have to face as far as patching software. We also admit that it is incredibly important. It seems to be that the attackers these days are targeting vulnerable applications. And we also see that it has a very steep impact. If we're looking at a nuclear energy plant being affected, this is not something that we want to take lightly. So patch management is obviously a must. But why do we want to talk about Panda patch management? Well, with the new Panda patch management, we're going to be able to help you keep systems free from vulnerabilities at a minimal cost. And we're talking about infrastructure, communications, and personnel, not just licensing. Infrastructure, you're not going to have a system propped up specifically for the solution. Technical personnel, it isn't going to require somebody with a bachelor's in computer science to be able to sit there and manipulate. And most importantly, you can do this, you can utilize the solution without interrupting your user's work. And if any of you have been in charge of managing patch management for your environments, you know that that is one of the big challenges, is being able to apply policies without impacting users. So let's look at kind of 4 key points here with this solution, and we'll start down at the bottom left with our intelligence. How broad is this? Well, with Panda patch management, you are going to be able to update all versions of Windows and hundreds of third-party applications. when it comes to scanning, and we're going to see this when we get into the demo, this is kind of the first step when we start looking at patching our machines. You'll be able to scan all of your computers from anywhere at any given time. Another nice feature is that there is no need for an additional deployment. So it operates from the same single agent that powers our Adaptive Defense 360 Ether products. With this solution, it's going to allow you to do a little bit of assessment and planning. So you'll be able to see the software that's affected, also the severity of the patch. If you want to, with the granularity that's involved, you could set up routines to apply patches on test computers, see how those behave, and then push out to the rest of the organization. You even have the ability to generate rules for automatic patching. So if you know what your criteria is ahead of time, then it's always going to be the case. We give you the ability to set that up in settings and then go on and live your life. The deployment, and we're talking about the deployment of the patches themselves, not the product, but the deployment is going to give you the ability to update a single device, hundreds of devices, or even thousands of devices in real time. Automatic management of interdependencies and the ability to control computer restarts, especially if we start talking about Windows updates. Those restarts are going to come into play, so you can automatically go in and choose how you want to manage those. So simplicity and compatibility, these are two big things. Simplicity especially. We've already talked about the challenges, and a lot of times what we've seen, you're managing security, we need to start thinking of patch management, as we've said before, as an integral part of your security, but unfortunately the products don't always take that approach. They tend to split out, so you're managing two different consoles for two different tasks, all under the security umbrella. But you're going to have simplicity with this product. It's all under one umbrella. As we saw before, compatible with hundreds of third-party applications. All your big players, Java, Adobe, Firefox, Chrome, all of those, and compatible with all Windows operating systems. And unified management, as we mentioned. This is going to be important. It's been kind of exciting watching the Ether platform mature. This is the next step in that is the patch management. So it will be integrated into, or it is integrated into the Ether web console. No need to deploy an agent on workstations or servers. Real-time patching. And another feature we're going to see in just a second, that when you combine this with Adaptive Defense, you have the ability to isolate unpatched systems with critical vulnerabilities. All right there in front of you, and we'll see it when we start taking a look at alerts. It's really neat. So obviously I'm getting kind of a little bit excited here about doing the demo part, so let's not waste any more time. Let's just go ahead and jump into our console. So what we're looking at now is our Adaptive Defense 360 console on the Ether platform. Many of you are going to be familiar with this. Some of you may not be. But what we're looking at here in particular is our dashboards page. So as you see over here on the left, we have several dashboards available: security, web access and spam, and our new entry into the mix, our patch management. So as with all of our other dashboards, our patch management dashboard is going to give us a very good overview of this particular module in relation to our devices in the environment. So right off the bat, we're going to see how many of our protected devices are currently utilizing patch management. You'll also see here in just a little bit that you're going to have the ability to set up policies to scan for vulnerabilities. So what we're looking at here is how long it's been since our devices have actually looked for available updates. We keep a running tally, or we keep you up to date on any of the patch installation tasks that you've set up, and we'll see those here in just a second as well. Those are all going to be listed down here. You can see all of them. You even have the ability to go back and see the installation history of the patches from previous install tasks. As you can see here, confirmations of everything being installed. Now, as we scroll down a little bit more, patch criticality. We separate this out into two different areas. So you're going to see critical patches, non-security related, and security patches. So what we mean by non-security related, but they are still critical patches, that these are vital to productivity as far as the application is concerned. Those will be listed here separately, along way from the security patches. Down at the bottom, you can list all of the available patches and go look at them that way, or we can also look at end-of-life programs. So let's start with our critical non-security related patches. If we click into those, we're going to get a look at the patch that is available. We get a look at the severity level here, the device as well, the program name. We even have the ability to search through some filters. So if we want to, as we see, we already have one applied for non-security related, we can change it up. Go look through different severities or criticalities. If we want to, we could also limit it down to different computers or computer types over here on the left. Now, a nice feature down here, and this is something that often gets overlooked when we start talking about patch management. Everybody talks about this, let's push out what we have, but there's often not enough focus on end-of-life programs. You know, an end-of-life program is something that is not getting updated anymore, and it's pretty likely the more end-of-life programs you have, the more holes that you're going to have in your security. So the key to those is to be able to go in and upgrade them to a new version or just get rid of them completely. So with this feature, we're going to be able to show you all of the end-of-life programs in your environment, including the device that they're currently installed on. So this is our status page. So let's move on now. From the status page, we're going to take a look at how we are going to go about setting up our scans to see if patches are available. This is going to be under our settings area. You're familiar with this already if you've come in and you've set up profiles for workstations and servers or Android devices. New area for patch management. With patch management, you're going to have the ability to automatically search for patches. You're going to be able to specify how frequently you want to search for patches. You want to search every day, every 12 hours, or you want to be as frequent as every hour. We give you that ability to do so. Inside of each search, what do you want to look for? We can look for those non-security related critical patches for third-party programs, or we can get into the severities for our Windows updates. Now, so why do we do this? It seems like it would be obvious that you just want to go out and search for everything and apply it as you see fit. There may be situations where you want to stagger your approach to finding and applying patches. You may want to dive all in and be very secure when it comes to your critical patches. So that may dictate that you set up a policy that searches twice a day, 3 times a day for critical patches and applies them whenever they're found. So you may set up a policy different for that, but then apply all your other patches, once a month. So you may only need to scan once a week or something along those lines. So we like to give you that granularity inside of the patch management scanning tasks. Now, once we have set up our scanning tasks, the next thing we want to do is we want to actually talk about applying those patches. We've gone out, we've looked, we've seen what's available, they're listed here. We need to go ahead and push those out to machines. It's a simple process to do as well. So we'll come in and we'll set up a task for installing patches. We're going to choose first when this is going to start. Do it as soon as possible. We can set it for a later day and time if we want to. Also, this is a really nice feature to have, is that we can determine how we're going to behave if we find that a computer is off during this patch window. We get asked this a lot. We can turn around and run that policy as soon as it is turned on. We could do nothing. If you have very strict change management, very strict maintenance windows, you have that option. Say, we'll wait till the next cycle. You can wait a little while to allow the user to boot up their machine and get working if you want. From there, we're going to specify a runtime. So once we kick off that process of applying patches, we may have 10 patches, we may have 3, we may have 20. How long do we want to work on applying these patches on the machine? You have 1 hour all the way up to 24 hours. And then how often do you want to repeat this policy? You could do it for every day, every 30 days, or just a one-time run. Now, again, we see the granularity in here. We've already looked for our previous patches, but of those that are available, what do we want to apply? Maybe this is that daily application policy. We want to go in and just apply the critical patches for third party and Windows. So you have the ability to do that. Or if you wanted to, you could apply everything. And then finally, down at the bottom is a question that is always asked when it comes to this. What about restarting computers? So here, you're going to have the ability through this policy to control that. You can either choose to not restart anything automatically and you manage that process, or the user manages that process, or you can go ahead and push it through. So if you're setting up a patch window during the middle of the night or something along those lines, you have the ability to control those restarts. Now, we've walked through the process. We've seen where we can get a good summary of what's out there, what's available. We've looked at the process of scanning for available updates, also the process for applying those updates. Now, let's look at the application as far as our devices are concerned. We've just created policies right now. We haven't applied them to anything. The really nice thing here, if we get into our groups, we have the ability to come into even a subgroup and say, all right, I want to go into the settings here. When the settings come up, we see our patch management option here. Maybe we've gone in and we've created 3 or 4 different policies. We can go in and select our patch management settings to apply to an entire group, and the inheritance will follow. We can have one policy for the entire organization, or if we want to, we can get all the way down to a single subgroup and change it. You even have the ability to override that and get into changing it at the device level, if you like. Now, where I want to back up a little bit here is to talk about the integration. This is kind of the point that I got a little bit excited when we were talking about the demo. It's nice that you have this in here, but how well does it play with the other modules? So if we scroll down, let's look at some of our alerts. Let's look at this one in particular here. We just received an Adaptive Defense 360 alert that says that somebody tried to run this executable that looked like an MP4. We get that alert, we come into our console, and if you'll notice here, we have the option to view available patches. Maybe this is something that takes advantage of a vulnerability. How can we quickly find out? We go into looking at the available patches for this device. It's going to list all those out there for me. You can see that those patches are critical in nature. So if we want to, we can immediately select them all and install them. But one other nice feature where this integrates, let's see, we just come in here and we look and we say, oh wow, I've got critical patches. Looks like somebody tried to hit the device. It's WinDesktop 2 as we see in here. We can come in here and say, all right, show me WinDesktop 2. We'll find that device. There we go. And we have the ability to isolate this computer. So we're kind of in a little bit of a panic here. We got an alert. We see it's got critical vulnerabilities. We want to minimize the impact or any further impact. We can isolate this computer right away. This is going to prevent this device from communicating with anybody internally or externally except for Panda servers. Once we have that device isolated, we can come in here and we can manage our patches. We could see what is available for the device. And from there, we can automatically go and push them out. Make sure the device is secure. Once it's secure, we have the ability to remove it from isolation and put it back into active work on the network. So as you'll see here, there's a lot of functionality, and it's great functionality. We're simplifying a lot of your patch management, but it's really tight integration and really nice integration, which really should work well. So now back to our slides. Let's go ahead and, whoop, we got a little bit behind there. So let's go ahead and wrap up, jump ahead and wrap up here with our summary. So while EDR and advanced detection and protection technologies are exciting, and they very much are, we talk about them a lot. Most of my presentations have been about that. They're vital. We cannot forget patch management. As we saw, 80% of attacks target vulnerabilities that have patches already available. So if you can find a way to close those 80% of vulnerabilities, whatever they may be, you're going to greatly reduce your attack surface. As we see here, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Simplify and strengthen, basically, as we mentioned earlier, IT staffs are shrinking, budgets are shrinking, software is growing, attacks are growing, malware is growing. You need a way to manage this. So you want a solution that simplifies the process, integrates it with what you're already doing, and allows you to overcome those hurdles, which are their own vulnerabilities in themselves, and further strengthen your network. By having this tightly integrated with Adaptive Defense 360, you get that full spectrum view. You have the ability to proactively push out patches, close those vulnerabilities using what is already in place. And with that, I am going to open the floor for a minute or two for any questions. It looks like we already have some, so let's check here what we have. So Mike asks, how does this product work if this is the only Panda product in my world? So, good question. The patch management is a module that requires a product on the Ether console. So you need to either have Endpoint Protection Plus, or Adaptive Defense product line. So that is a requirement. We cannot provide you with just patch management as a standalone. So Marcus asks, do you only take care of having the latest patches deployed, or do you have a vulnerability database and use, e.g., the CVSS score to rate a software product? So it's not just the latest patches that are deployed. We do tie in with CVE, so that information is also available, and there's vendor tie-ins there as well. Kevin asks, will we get a copy of this recording? Yes, you will. We're going to make that available on our YouTube channel shortly after the webinar has completed. One of our last ones here, Steve asks, is there a list of third-party applications included in this product? Steve, contact me or contact your sales reps afterwards. We do have, I believe, a list available that I can share with you. So Brent asks, if we create a test group that is patched automatically, can the patches be approved for the rest of our computers after a few days? So Brent, yeah, you can. You're just talking about a little bit of a difference there. You're going to have an automatically patched group and a group that isn't automatically patched. So that is possible. So Jordan asks, I only have systems management. Does this mean I cannot deploy patches for Windows? No, systems management does have a native functionality for deploying patches to Windows as well. This product, however, if you're talking about integration, this product doesn't integrate with the systems management. So Willie says, as we all know, Microsoft has issues with some patches. How does Panda address reversing a patch update? I believe that functionality is coming very, very soon. That was the same question that I asked, is how we are managing rollbacks. So I think the rollbacks are going to be coming very soon. And I think that's kind of the idea, Willie, behind what we were saying before is the flexibility and the granularity that's in there allows you to kind of set up a test bed. You want to push them out first. I've got maybe 5 VMs or something that simulate a small network. I want to push those out to the virtual server, the virtual desktop, see how they behave, see how they work. And if they brick the machines, then I'm definitely not releasing it to the rest of the network. That was kind of the idea, one of the approaches that we were sort of recommending in the presentation. But I believe the rollback will be coming. And you are welcome. Anybody else? By the way, I really appreciate the interaction. We had some really great questions today. Good to see. All right, it looks like that covers just about everything. So if a question comes to mind, like I said, you have my contact email right there in front of you. There's my email address on the screen. Feel free to shoot an email over to me later if you want to, and I'll be happy to send anything over. As far as the questions that were asked that require follow-up responses, I'll send those out a little bit later today as well. I want to thank everybody for attending. I really appreciate the turnout. I appreciate the questions. I'm glad you guys seem to be as interested in this, or as excited about this as I am personally. I think it's a big step forward. So thank you for coming, and keep your eye out on your email. Look for our next webinars. I think our next one is actually going to be about threat hunting, so it's going to be a pretty good presentation. Thanks again, and we will talk to you soon.